The sirens hit the night like a blade. One second, I was on my porch with a cup of tea gone cold, listening to the winter wind worry the bare branches. The next, red and blue light flickered across my living room walls, and the air outside filled with that familiar wail that makes every mother's stomach drop. Except this time, it did. I didn't know that yet, not until my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't saved but still recognized in my bones. "Ms. Jackson?" a man said. His voice was clipped, professional. "This is dispatch. There's been a structure fire on Maple Ridge. We have units en route. We need you to stay clear of the scene." Maple Ridge. That was Ronald Mercer's street. My ex-husband. The man who walked out on me and our little boy the moment the doctor used the word disability, like my child was a stain on his perfect life. The man who hadn't said my name in 15 years, unless he was spitting it like a curse. And now there was a fire at his house. I grabbed my coat without thinking. I didn't lock the door. I didn't even put on the right shoes. I just moved, because when you've been a single mom raised on urgency, your body has a muscle memory for emergencies. By the time I turned onto Maple Ridge, smoke was already bruising the sky. Thick, dark, rolling in heavy waves over the roofs like a storm cloud that didn't belong. Neighbors stood in clumps on their lawns, half-dressed, barefoot, wrapped in blankets. Someone's dog barked like it was trying to warn the whole world. The air smelled like burning insulation and wet leaves, and underneath it, plastic, poison. And there, in the middle of it all, was Ronald. Older than I remembered, thinner, but still carrying himself like he owned the street. He paced behind the yellow tape, shouting at anybody in a uniform like they were his employees. "Where are the firefighters?" he snapped. "My son is in there. My boy is in there. Do you hear me?" My boy. I almost laughed, and the sound came out like a choke, because Ronald didn't say "my boy," unless he meant the child he had with the woman he replaced me with. The second chance family, he built like a showroom model. Fresh paint and new furniture, no cracks allowed. I pushed through the crowd until a police officer raised a hand. "Ma'am, you can't—" "I'm not going in," I said. "I just need to see." The officer's gaze flicked over my face. Then he nodded, just once, and let me stand behind the tape. Flames licked out of a second-floor window. The glass was gone, and orange light danced inside the room like something alive. Somewhere in the house, something popped, sharp and loud. The whole structure groaned like it was deciding whether to keep standing. Ronald turned, scanning the crowd with frantic eyes. That's when he saw me. Recognition crossed his face in slow motion. First confusion, then disbelief. Then that same crooked grin I remembered, the one he used right before he'd say something cruel just to see if it landed. "Loretta," he drawled. "Well, look at you. You come running when you smell trouble, huh?" I didn't answer. I didn't have anything for him. He stepped closer to the tape. "Where's your kid?" he asked, eyes narrowing. "That boy you insisted on keeping, the one who couldn't even walk right. Where is he now? Still limping around somewhere, or did life finally do you a favor?" The words hit my chest like hot gravel. 15 years ago, I would have folded. I would have tried to explain. I would have begged him to be decent. But I'm 62 now, and at 62, you learn that some people don't deserve your softness. So I just looked at him, calm, unblinking, and said, "You should worry about your house, Ron." He scoffed. "I'm worried about my son," he snapped, voice cracking. "Jaylen's in there, 15. He went back for his phone. Stupid kid. Then the smoke got bad. Where are the units? Why aren't they moving?" As if on cue, the first engine screamed into view, tires spitting gravel. Then another. Then the ladder truck. Doors flew open. Boots hit pavement. Men and women in turnout gear moved with fast, practiced purpose. Somebody unrolled a hose, and water thundered onto the front lawn. And then a voice cut through all of it. Low, controlled, carrying like it belonged. "Establishing command. This is Engine 12 on scene. We've got a 2-story residential heavy fire showing Alpha side, second floor. Primary search pending. Set up ventilation on Bravo. Get water on that window now." It wasn't loud the way Ronald was loud. It didn't have to be. It had authority. The crowd quieted without being told. Even Ronald's mouth fell open as he turned toward the source of the voice, like a man looking for salvation. I turned too, and for a second, my whole body forgot how to breathe. Because the person stepping forward wasn't just any firefighter, he was the one everybody moved around, the one people looked to before they moved. A helmet sat low on his brow. A radio clipped to his shoulder crackled with static and names. His hands, gloved and steady, pointed and signaled like he was conducting the chaos. On the back of his jacket, in reflective letters, it read, Captain Jackson, my son. Elijah. Eli Jackson. The boy Ronald called broken. The boy people pitied. The boy I carried to physical therapy sessions on city buses, praying my knees wouldn't give out. The boy who learned to climb stairs slowly, carefully, refusing to let the world shame him for taking up space. Now he was the fire department incident commander on a scene that could kill people. Now he was the calm in the middle of a storm. And Ronald, the man who worshipped perfection, was about to beg the son he rejected to save his other child. I watched it happen in real time. Ronald shoved forward, pushing past the tape. Hey, the officer barked. Sir, get back! But Ronald was already waving his arms like a man drowning. Captain! Captain! He shouted. My son is in there. You have to get him out. Now! Eli didn't even flinch. He didn't look up right away. He studied the structure, reading it the way some people read faces. He scanned the window, the smoke, the roofline. He listened to a firefighter's report, then spoke into his radio with the same steady tone. Copy, 2 in, 2 out. Primary search is priority. Watch the floor integrity on the stairwell. We're not losing a kid tonight, not on my watch. Then, only then, he turned his head slightly, as if he'd just noticed the screaming man at the edge of his world. Sir, Eli said, step back behind the tape. Ronald blinked like he'd been slapped. I'm the father, he said. You don't understand. That's my son in there. Eli's gaze didn't change. It stayed professional, neutral. I understand enough, Eli said. Step back. Ronald looked him over, trying to place him. The helmet hid Eli's hair. The mask covered half his face. All Ronald could see was the stance, the control, the strength he never expected from the child he rejected. Then his eyes flicked to the name on the jacket again. Jackson. His throat bobbed. He turned sharply toward me. Jackson? He repeated. Who the hell is Captain Jackson? I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch, because sometimes the best revenge isn't a scream, it's the truth, delivered calmly, right when it can't be ignored. That's my son, I said finally. Eli. Ronald stared at me. His mouth opened, then closed. His eyes darted back to Eli, then to me again. No, he whispered. No, that's not. A sudden crash from inside the house cut him off. Flames surged in the upstairs window, licking higher. The crowd gasped in a single, shared breath. Somewhere inside, a faint sound pierced through the roar, a thin, terrified yell. Dad! Ronald made a sound that didn't even qualify as a word, just a raw animal noise as he lunged forward again. Jaylen! He screamed. That's him! That's my boy! Get him out! 2 firefighters moved to restrain him. Ronald fought them, wild-eyed, desperate. And in that moment, with smoke staining the sky and the whole neighborhood watching, the man who once told me my child was a burden began to crumble. He looked straight at Eli, my abandoned child who became a hero, and he shouted the one thing he never thought he'd have to say, Please! The word landed like thunder. Eli's body stilled for half a beat. Not because he was surprised. Because no matter how far you've come, there are some sounds your childhood remembers. Then Eli stepped closer, not to Ronald, but to the line of firefighters preparing to enter. Primary search, go, he ordered. Ladder set, ventilation ready. Darnell, you're on the stairwell. Keisha, prep EMS, smoke inhalation, possible burns. Let's move. Everyone moved. because Captain Jackson said so, and I stood there behind the tape, heart pounding, watching my son command the night. Watching Ronald realize, too late, what he threw away. My mind flashed back in ugly, bright snapshots. Eli at 6, gripping the parallel bars while a therapist counted. Eli at 9, coming home with scraped palms. Eli at 13, studying building diagrams at our kitchen table. Eli at 18, whispering, "Ma, I'm not asking the world to lower the bar. I'm training to clear it." I remembered the acceptance letter to the fire academy and the way his smile shook my knees. He learned fire behavior like scripture, learned incident command like a second language, and turned his so-called limitation into strategy. Sharp with details, calm under pressure. People like to say abandoned child becomes hero or disabled son becomes fire captain, like it's a headline. They don't see the nights. They don't see the blisters on my hands from double shifts. They don't see a single mom raise son alone, praying over a boy's aching legs and stubborn heart. Ronald left us with a sneer, convinced we'd disappear. Tonight his regret has nowhere to hide. He thought he'd never need us. He was wrong. If you've ever watched somebody reap what they sowed, you know there's a strange quiet in it. Not joy, not cruelty, just truth settling into place. This is a house fire rescue true story, and every detail still makes my heart race. But before I tell you what happens next, before I tell you who comes out of that burning house and what my ex-husband says when my son finally takes off his mask, I need you to do one thing for me. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from right now? What city, what state? And don't click away, because the next few minutes are where the karma and redemption story turns sharp. And you're going to hear the difference between forgiveness versus indifference in the cleanest words my son has ever spoken. If you're still here with me, hit that like button too. It helps this story reach the people who need it, especially the ones who need to see what a mother's sacrifice pays off really looks like. Don't click away. That's what I wanted to say to every neighbor pressed behind the yellow tape, to every stranger filming the flames. Because the fire on Maple Ridge wasn't the first time Ronald Mercer tried to burn my life down. It was just the first time the whole street could see the smoke. While my son's crew vanished into that house, boots thudding, radios snapping, I stood there with the cold biting through my coat and Ronald's voice biting deeper. "Where's that defective kid of yours?" He said it like Eli was a broken appliance, like I should have returned him. But before you can understand what it feels like to watch an abandoned child become a hero, you have to meet the version of me who still believed Ronald's charm meant love. 20 years ago, I was 28 and tired of being overlooked. I worked reception at a small insurance office outside Birmingham, the kind of place where the copier jammed twice a day and everybody acted like your name was optional. I was the woman people depended on and then forgot. Then Ronald walked in like he owned the building. He'd transferred from Chicago, all polished shoes and loud cologne, talking fast about opportunity. He didn't flirt. He performed. Flowers to my desk, lunch delivered with my name written big, a car ride home that turned into an hour of him telling me I was different, that he could see me living better than this. I should have heard the control hiding inside those compliments. Back then, I heard rescue. 6 months later, I was in a white dress, smiling so wide my cheeks hurt, while Ronald promised he'd take care of me forever. His mother hugged me and called me baby. His friends toasted to the perfect couple. And I believed it, because when you've been hungry for love, you'll mistake possession for protection. The first year was sweet on the surface. Ronald worked sales, brought home money, loved showing me off at restaurants with linen napkins, but even then, there were rules. The way he'd correct how I laughed, the way he'd choose my outfits, then act like it was a favor, the way he'd say, "A man should provide," and then slide my paycheck across the table like it was a problem. "Quit," he told me one night, casual as breathing. "My wife doesn't need to work." I said I liked working. He kissed my forehead and smiled like I was a child. "You'll like resting more." That was the beginning of me shrinking into the shape that fit his life. When I got pregnant, Ronald acted like the world had crowned him. He scooped me up and spun me around the living room, shouting, "My boy! My heir!" like the baby was already a trophy. He bought football onesies before we even knew the sex. He talked about private schools, college funds, legacy, and then the pregnancy stopped being mine. He monitored what I ate. He criticized the number on the scale. He timed my walks. He came to every appointment, not holding my hand, but holding the conversation, steering it, steering me, steering everything toward his version of perfect. At my last ultrasound, the doctor's smile faded. He stared at the screen too long, then called in another tech. They pointed, whispered. My throat went dry. "Is something wrong?" I asked. The doctor chose his words carefully. "We're seeing markers that can indicate motor development challenges. It doesn't mean your baby can't have a full life, but you should be prepared for possible mobility issues." Ronald's face hardened like cement. "No," he said, standing up. "Run it again." "You're wrong." The doctor tried to explain that bodies aren't blueprints, that early intervention helps. Ronald didn't hear a word. He heard imperfection. He heard embarrassment. He walked out without looking back. I sat there with my hands on my belly, feeling my baby roll under my palm, and I cried. Not because of the diagnosis, but because I suddenly understood I was pregnant by myself. Eli was born on a humid August morning, after a labor that felt like my bones were splitting. I remember his first sound, strong, angry, alive. The nurse held him up, pink and squirming, and said, "He's beautiful." And he was. His fingers curled around mine like a promise. Then Ronald saw the way Eli's little legs didn't kick quite the same, the way the doctor checked his hips twice, the way the nurse said the word therapy with gentle care. Ronald's jaw clenched. "I'm not doing this," he said, low enough that only I could hear. "I'm not raising a broken kid." I was wrecked, stitched up, shaking. Still, I reached for him like love could fix anything. "Ron, he's our son. He needs us." Ronald stepped back like my words were contagious. "He needs you," he corrected. "You wanted this." Those 4 words were the moment my marriage died. He came back to the house once, not to check on us, but to collect his suits. He moved through our hallway like a stranger, grabbing hangers, zipping bags, refusing to look at the baby in the bassinet. "You'll keep the place for a few months," he said, as if he was being generous. "Then we'll sell it. I'm not paying forever. And don't expect child support to fund all that." All that. My son. By the time the divorce papers came, Ronald already smelled like somebody else's perfume. His mother stopped answering my calls. Their perfect couple picture got replaced, and I became the story nobody wanted to mention. So I did what women like me always do. I kept my head down, and I kept promises to Eli. I worked. I became the single mom raised son alone cliché people love to praise from a distance and avoid up close. I cleaned offices at night, scrubbed bathrooms that weren't mine, emptied trash from men who never learned my name. I took Eli to physical therapy on buses that ran late, with diapers in my bag and a knot in my throat. I learned stretches, braces, routines. I learned how to turn "we'll see" into "watch us." The first time Eli pulled himself up on the couch, I cried so hard I scared him. The first time he took 3 shaky steps with his walker, I clapped until my palms burned. It wasn't a tragedy. It was a mobility disability success story being written in real time, one stubborn day at a time. But it was lonely. Some nights, after midnight, I'd lay in bed listening to Eli breathe and let myself feel it. The betrayal, the fear. Then morning would come, and I'd wipe my face, warm his bottle, and keep moving. Because my baby didn't need a broken mother. He needed a fighter. By the time Eli was 10, he was tired of people speaking to him like he couldn't understand. He'd look up from his homework and ask, "Ma, why they talk slow?" "Because they don't know you," I'd tell him, "and we don't live our lives to match their expectations." That sentence became our anthem, and somewhere along the way, The boy Ronald refused to claim started dreaming bigger than survival. He loved sirens and radios. He'd watch firefighters on TV and lean forward like he was listening for something underneath the noise. When a neighborhood house caught fire and we stood at a safe distance, Eli didn't flinch at the smoke. He studied the patterns. He asked how people stayed calm. At 13, he drew floor plans on scrap paper. At 15, he read about incident command like other boys read sports stats. His body moved differently, yes, but his focus was iron. "You want to be a firefighter?" I asked him one night, half scared, half proud. Eli nodded. "I want to pull people out," he said. "I want to be the calm." I didn't know then that those words would bring us right back to Maple Ridge, under flashing lights, with Ronald Mercer shaking behind a strip of tape, about to learn what it means when a disabled son becomes fire captain. And if you think Ronald's cruelty ended with the divorce, you don't know men like him. You don't know how a father regrets leaving family only when his own life catches fire. So stay with me, because the next part isn't just about flames in a window. It's about the moment my son walks out of that smoke and chooses what kind of man he will be, right in front of the man who once tried to erase him. I stayed with you because the fire doesn't really start on Maple Ridge. It starts years earlier, in quiet rooms where people decide what you're worth. After Ronald left, life became a long hallway of closed doors. Some days it felt like I was walking down it barefoot, carrying a child on my hip and a future on my back. Folks hear single mom and imagine a woman who's loud and angry, always asking for help. That wasn't me. I was tired. I was careful. I learned to be polite even when my insides were screaming, because politeness kept people from slamming the door in my face. Eli grew up in that tension, between what the world assumed and what I refused to accept. His legs were the first thing people noticed, the slight drag when he was little, the brace, the way he took stairs like they were math problems, one step, breathe, another step. Strangers would stare and then do that fake smile like pity was kindness. Teachers would talk to him like he was younger than he was. Kids would ask questions that were cruel because they didn't know any better. And then they'd get older and still ask them because somebody taught them it was funny. Eli learned early to keep his face calm. But at night, in our small apartment, he'd climb into my bed and whisper, "Ma, why me?" I would hold him and say, "Because you're strong enough for it." We didn't have much, but we had routines. Therapy appointments, church on Sundays, homework at the kitchen table, me stretching his legs the way the physical therapist showed me. Slow, steady, like love could be measured in patience. Every time he reached a milestone, I treated it like a holiday. When he learned to ride a bike, 3 wheels, thick tires, he looked like he was flying. He came back around the block with his face shining, breathing hard, yelling, Ma, did you see?" I saw. Because I was afraid if I didn't, no one else would. By middle school, Eli's mind started doing something that surprised even me. He could take a complicated thing and break it down like he was taking apart a radio. If his body moved differently, his brain moved like lightning. He became obsessed with systems, how they worked, why they failed, what happened when one small thing went wrong. It started with the smoke alarm in our kitchen. It went off one night because I burned the cornbread. Don't judge me. I was exhausted. And Eli jumped up, reached for a stool, and started studying the alarm like it was a mystery. He popped it open, looked at the battery, the little metal springs, the plastic housing. "Why does it scream like that?" he asked. "So we don't die in our sleep," I said, waving a dish towel. He nodded slowly, like he filed that away. A week later, he came home from the library with a book that was way too advanced for his age. It had diagrams of fire behavior, smoke patterns, evacuation routes. He set it on the table like it was treasure. "Where'd you get that?" I asked. "Ms. Carter let me borrow it," he said. "She said I can read anything if I want." Eli read that book like some kids read comic books. He read it on the bus. He read it while I cooked. He started watching training videos, not the dramatic TV stuff, but real instruction. He learned words like ventilation and flashover before he learned how to flirt. By 15, his room looked like a little command center. Maps on the wall. A cheap radio he found at a yard sale, taken apart and put back together. Notes in neat handwriting. He'd sit at his desk, legs stretched out, and talk to me like he was explaining a plan. "Fire is a living thing," he said one night, tapping a diagram. "It eats oxygen. It moves where it's fed. If you understand what it wants, you can control it." I stared at my son, the same boy Ronald called broken, and I felt pride mixed with fear. Then Eli told me what he wanted. "I want to join the department," he said, voice steady. I almost dropped the laundry basket. "Baby, no," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop it. "That job—" "I know," he interrupted gently. "I know it's dangerous." "Dangerous doesn't even cover it," I snapped, then softened because he looked at me with those patient eyes. "Eli, you've fought harder than anybody should have to fight just to walk. I don't want you running into burning buildings." He didn't laugh. He reached across the table and put his hand on mine. "I don't want to run," he said. "I want to lead. I want to be the calm. I want to pull people out, Ma. People like us don't always get pulled out." Those words stayed with me. It wasn't just about fire. It was about being seen, being valued, being protected by the same system that often ignored you. I told him, "If you do this, you do it smart." Eli nodded. "That's the plan." He started preparing like a man twice his age. Strength training, modified to his body. Cardio, stair work. And the studying. Lord, the studying. He learned codes, protocols, emergency management. He learned incident command like it was a second language. When other boys were out chasing trouble, Eli was highlighting textbooks and running scenario drills. There were people who tried to stop him. A guidance counselor at his high school pulled me aside and said, "Mrs. Jackson, maybe you should encourage him towards something more realistic." "Realistic?" I repeated. "Yes," she said, smiling like she was doing me a favor. "Some job where he won't struggle." I leaned closer and said, "My son has been struggling since he took his first breath. That's why he knows how to win." Eli applied anyway, to the fire academy, to community college for fire science, to every program that could give him the knowledge without asking his body to pretend it was somebody else's. He got rejected by one program with a polite letter about physical requirements. He pinned that letter to his wall. "What's that for?" I asked. "So I don't forget what I'm up against," he said. Then he got accepted somewhere else, one that focused on prevention, operations, and command, where intelligence and calm mattered as much as speed. He commuted by bus before he had a car, leaving before dawn, coming home after dark. I'd stay up and listen for his key in the lock, the small click that meant he was safe. By the time he graduated, he already had a reputation, not as the kid with the brace, but as the kid who knew the material better than the instructors. He was the one other cadets asked when they didn't understand a scenario, the one who stayed after class to help. At his first department interview, an older captain looked at him and said, "You sure you can do this, son?" Eli smiled politely. "Yes, sir." The captain raised an eyebrow. "You don't seem nervous." Eli's voice didn't change. "I've been nervous my whole life, sir. I learned how to work anyway." He got hired, but hired didn't mean welcomed. The first day Eli walked into Station 12, the air felt like old metal, history, tradition, rules nobody wrote down. The bay doors were open, sunlight slanting across the trucks, and men leaned on toolboxes like they were part of the furniture. They looked at my son the way people look at a cracked mirror, curious, uncomfortable, trying not to stare. Eli introduced himself with the same calm he carried everywhere. "Elijah Jackson," he said, hand out, voice respectful. Most of them shook his hand. A few didn't. One guy, thick neck, chewing gum like it was a job, looked Eli up and down and said, "So what you gonna do if the stairs are gone?" Eli didn't snap. He didn't defend. He just smiled lightly and said, "The same thing you'll do if your lungs give out. Use training." The room went quiet for a beat. Then somebody laughed, surprised, and a little impressed. The gum guy's eyes narrowed, but he didn't have a comeback. That was my son's gift. He didn't need to fight dirty. He just needed to be exact. Still, the tests came. They put him through drills that weren't on paper. They'd change the rules mid-run. They'd forget to brief him. They'd assign him to the heavy gear closet like he was a helper, not a firefighter. Eli took it all in and kept showing up early. He'd text me at 5:12 a.m., before my coffee even finished dripping. "Morning, Ma. Love you." "I'm good." I'd text back, "Be safe. Eat. Don't let them get in your head." Sometimes, in the first year, he'd come home with bruises on his forearms from hauling hose. His knees would ache from long days on hard concrete. He'd sit at my table and roll his shoulders like he was trying to loosen the weight of other people's doubt. I learned not to ask, "Do they treat you right?" Because I didn't want to hand him that bitterness like a gift. Instead, I'd ask, "What did you learn today?" And Eli would talk about pump pressure, about ladder angles, about how wind changes everything, about why calm is a skill you train like muscle. He was building himself from the inside out, and the world kept trying to measure him from the outside in. There was one lieutenant, though, who saw him different. Lieutenant Darnell Price. Darnell was the kind of man who didn't waste words. Mid-30s, steady eyes, the kind of presence that made rookies straighten up without being told. The first time Eli messed up a radio call, just one number off, Darnell didn't embarrass him. He pulled him aside and said, "You're smart. Don't rush." "Smart people rush because they think speed proves something." Eli nodded. "Yes, sir." Darnell studied him for a moment, then added, "You don't have to prove you belong by bleeding. You belong by thinking." That sentence mattered, because the department culture loved the myth of the invincible body. Eli's body was honest. It told the truth about limits, but his mind was a weapon, and Darnell respected weapons. Darnell started giving Eli the assignments that made him better instead of smaller. Community inspections, pre-plans for high-risk buildings, training scenarios where command decisions mattered. Eli thrived. Still, there were calls that tested him in ways books couldn't prepare you for. The first time Eli rode the engine to a real fire, he didn't tell me until afterward. I found out because he showed up at my door at midnight, face pale under the soot, eyes too bright. "You okay?" I asked, grabbing his shoulders. He nodded, but his breath was shallow. "It was a kitchen fire," he said. "Grease. Whole apartment filled with smoke." "Anybody hurt?" Eli swallowed. "A little girl," he said. 6, maybe. She was under the bed." My stomach dropped. "Eli!" He rubbed his face with both hands, then looked up. "We got her out," he said quickly. "She's fine. She was coughing, scared. But we got her out." Relief hit me so hard my knees softened. "Thank God." Eli nodded, then his voice went quiet. When I carried her down the stairs, she wrapped her arms around my neck like I was her whole world. "I thought about you," he whispered. "I thought about how you carried me when I was little, and the stairs felt like mountains." I pulled him into a hug, and he held on for a second longer than usual. That was the night I understood something. Eli wasn't running toward fire to prove anything to men like Ronald. He was running toward fire because he knew what it felt like to be vulnerable, and he couldn't stand to watch other people feel that alone. Over the next few years, Eli's name started moving through the department in a different way. Not as gossip, as respect. He became the guy you wanted on your scene because he didn't panic, because he saw patterns, because he didn't let ego get people killed. There was a car wreck on I-20 where fuel spilled and the driver was trapped. The crew on scene was ready to cut him out fast, but Eli noticed the smell and the angle and yelled, "Hold up!" He had them reposition, kill the battery, foam the area, then cut. 10 seconds later, the engine compartment flashed. If they'd been in the wrong spot, it would have been bodies. People remembered that. There was a warehouse alarm where everybody assumed it was nothing, just a faulty sensor. Eli asked one extra question. "What's stored inside?" The answer was chemicals. He insisted on hazmat precautions. They found a slow leak, invisible to the naked eye, that could have turned into an explosion. People remembered that too. Those are the moments that make a success story real. Not applause, not headlines. Decisions that keep people alive. Around that time, Eli also started doing something that made me proud in a quieter way. He went back to the neighborhoods the city liked to forget. Our neighborhoods. He pushed a program through city council to install smoke alarms for free in low-income homes, especially for seniors and families with kids. He'd knock on doors with a toolbox and a clipboard, explain how to test the battery, how to make an escape plan, how to keep space heaters away from curtains. Some folks looked at him like he was a miracle. "A firefighter and a black man? In my house?" An older lady said once, laughing in disbelief. Eli smiled and said, "Ma'am, you deserve to be safe. That's all." I went with him on a few Saturdays, carrying pamphlets, listening to him talk to people with patience, watching him become the calm in rooms that weren't on fire yet, but could be if nobody cared. That's the part of a karma and redemption story people don't see. The long years where you keep doing the right thing without any promise of payback. And yes, prejudice stayed in the corners. There was a captain from another station who called Eli inspirational every time he saw him, like it was Eli's job to make able-bodied men feel grateful for their own luck. Eli never corrected him in public. He just outperformed him in every training scenario. There was a rookie who joked, "Cap, you got a special brace for your ego too?" in front of the crew, trying to get laughs. Eli looked at him and said evenly, "You want to be funny or you want to be safe?" The rookie shut up. Eli learned when to speak and when to let silence do the work. That's leadership. By 27, he tested for lieutenant. He scored number 1. By 29, he tested for captain. Number 1 again. At the promotion ceremony, they called his name, and he walked across that stage in dress uniform, shoulders back, eyes steady. I sat in the audience with my hands folded tight in my lap, trying not to cry so hard I embarrassed him. When they placed the captain's badge on his chest, I felt something in my spirit unclench. Not because I needed a trophy, because it meant the world finally had to see what I'd known all along. My son was never defective. The limitation was always in the head of the one who underestimated. Afterward, outside the station, Eli hugged me and said, "You did this too." I shook my head. "No, baby, I kept you alive. You built the rest." He smiled. "You built the foundation. That's what love is. Foundation work nobody applauds. And in those years, I almost forgot Ronald existed. Almost. Sometimes a mutual acquaintance would mention him in passing. Ron got a new job. Ron moved up. Ron's got a boy now, plays ball. I didn't ask questions. I didn't care. I told myself his chapter in our book was closed. Then, one fall afternoon, I made the mistake of scrolling social media too long. Somebody had reposted Ronald's family photo. There he was, arm around a woman with expensive hair and a bright smile. Jaylen stood beside them, tall and handsome in a Letterman jacket, holding a football helmet. The caption said, "Blessed." I stared at that word until my eyes burned. Blessed. Like the years he left me to scrub toilets and stretch a child's legs didn't exist. Like Eli's therapy sessions were some dark rumor, not reality. Like Ronald had been righteous. I closed the app and sat in silence until the anger drained into something colder. I wasn't jealous of Ronald's life. I was disgusted by his performance. But even that disgust faded with time, because I had a real life to live. Eli took me to doctor appointments and made me take my medicine. He fixed my porch step. He made me laugh at stupid jokes. He brought home leftover chili from the station and acted like it was five-star dining. We built a peace that didn't depend on anybody else's approval. And then, because life loves irony, the past drove straight back into our lane. The funny thing about peace is that you don't realize you have it until something tries to steal it. For a long time, our days were simple. Eli worked rotating shifts, 24 on, 48 off, plus the extra meetings and trainings that come with leadership. I joined a church quilting circle and pretended I wasn't addicted to gossip. Eli would call me during his meal break just to say, "Drink water." like he was my father, and not my son. Some nights he'd bring his crew by for a quick plate. Darnell with that quiet grin, Keisha laughing loud enough to shake my cabinets, a few rookies who looked at Eli like the definition of steady. I liked seeing that. Not because I needed my son worshipped, but because I wanted him surrounded by people who respected him for the right reasons. I wanted him to have a family that didn't share his blood, but shared his back. Eli's name started showing up in places that made me blink. A community award for safety outreach, a local newspaper piece about the smoke alarm program, a city council meeting where they thanked Captain Jackson for reducing residential fire fatalities. Sometimes older women at church would stop me in the hallway and say, "That's your boy? The captain? Lord, you did something right." I'd smile and answer, "He did something right." Because that's the truth. A mother can hold the door open, but the child has to walk through it. And yet, every once in a while, life would tap my shoulder and remind me that Ronald wasn't just a memory. He was still out there, living in the same city, breathing the same air. One day, months before Maple Ridge burned, I ran into a woman from my old office job at a pharmacy. She recognized me, hugged me too tight, and started talking before I could stop her. "Girl, you hear about Ronald?" she whispered, eyes shining like she was delivering news from a battlefield. "No," I said flatly. "Well," she continued, lowering her voice anyway, "he's been struggling. Not like you struggled, but, you know, his wife been talking about leaving. Money issues. That boy of his got health stuff, too. Seizures, I heard." The word seizures hit me like a stone. I didn't ask questions, I didn't want details. But the information planted itself in my chest like a seed I didn't ask for. I went home and tried to forget it. I told myself, it's not my business. It's not Eli's business. We don't owe Ronald anything. Still, that night, I watched Eli sleeping on my couch after a long shift, boots by the door, uniform folded, face soft in a way it never was when he was on scene. I looked at him and thought, if Ronald's child is sick, it doesn't erase what Ronald did. It doesn't rewrite our story. It just proves what I already knew. Life is never as perfect as Ronald pretends. Eli never mentioned Ronald. If he thought about him, he didn't say it. My son had learned how to put old pain in a locked drawer and keep living. That's what survival looks like when it grows up into strength. Then came the week everything shifted. Eli was on day 2 of a brutal stretch. Training in the mornings, inspections in the afternoons, overnight calls that came in like bad dreams. On Monday, he responded to a small apartment fire where an elderly man refused to leave because he didn't want to abandon his cat. Eli crawled under the bed, pulled out the cat, and then dragged the man out by his coat collar like he was hauling stubbornness itself. The old man thanked him, shaking, tears mixing with soot. Eli came home that night with scratches on his wrist and joked about it like it was nothing. "Ma," he said, showing me the scratches like a kid showing a scraped knee. "I rescued a cat. Don't tell anybody." On Tuesday, there was a false alarm at an elementary school. Kids lined up outside in pajamas and sneakers, shivering, eyes wide. Eli walked the line and cracked jokes, making them laugh so they wouldn't be scared of the smell of smoke. He carried one little boy on his hip because the kid's legs were shaking too hard to stand. When I heard that story, I thought, my son is always rescuing children, even when there's no fire. On Wednesday, the wind started picking up. The weather forecast warned about gusts, dry air, the kind of conditions that turn a small flame into a monster. Eli talked about it over dinner, tapping the window when it rattled. "Wind-driven fires are the ones that get people," he said. "They move faster than your brain expects." I didn't like the way my stomach tightened when he said it. That night I had a dream of smoke filling my lungs. I woke up coughing like my body was trying to warn me. By Thursday afternoon, Eli was back on shift. He called me at 4:47 p.m. and said, "I'm on. Lock your door, and don't be out driving around." "I'm 62, not 16, I told him. He laughed. Still, when we hung up, I went about my evening. Washed dishes, folded laundry, watched a rerun show I didn't even like. The wind kept hitting the house, making the porch light sway. At 9:13 p.m., my phone lit up with a text from Eli. Busy tonight. Love you. At 9:26 p.m., another message. Wind's bad. We're getting calls. I stared at my screen, that old familiar fear rising like a tide. The fear of sirens, the fear of waiting. At 10:02 p.m., the sirens started, and somewhere across town, Maple Ridge caught fire. Then came that night. I didn't know that the address on Eli's dispatch screen belonged to Ronald. I only knew the sound of sirens was chasing my heart again, and this time, the past was riding with them too. The night Maple Ridge burned. It started with a call on Eli's radio while he was on shift. A structure fire, residential, possible entrapment, windy conditions. Eli told me later that when he heard the address, something in his chest tightened, like his body recognized the name before his mind did. Maple Ridge wasn't our neighborhood. It was a step up. Bigger yards, nicer cars. The kind of place Ronald always wanted to prove he belonged. Eli rolled up in command and saw the house coughing smoke into the sky. He saw the neighbors with phones out. He saw fire showing on the second floor. He saw panic, raw and contagious. Then he saw the man at the tape screaming like the world owed him. Ronald. Eli didn't stop. He didn't freeze. He didn't let it show. He established command. Assigned tasks. Protected his people. He became the fire department incident commander, the calm center of chaos. And while all of that happened, I was driving there with my heart in my throat, following the sirens like they were calling my name. By the time I arrived, Ronald's voice was already echoing. My son is in there! He didn't see me at first. He was too busy demanding immediate attention, just like he used to demand it from me. When he did see me, the old cruelty popped out like a reflex. He asked where my defective boy was, like he was still proud of the worst thing he'd ever been. I didn't give him what he wanted. I didn't flinch. I didn't shrink. Because I had spent too many years building myself back up. Then Eli stepped forward under the lights, Captain Jackson blazing across his back, and the world shifted. Ronald shouted for help. He shoved toward the tape. He screamed like he could bully fire the way he bullied people. Eli's voice cut through the noise. Sir, step back behind the tape. Ronald insisted he was the father. He demanded special treatment. The kind of entitlement that makes a scene dangerous. Eli stayed steady. Then let us do our job. Inside the house, his crew moved through smoke and heat, searching with gloved hands and disciplined instincts. Radios snapped with short updates. Eli pictured the floor plan in his head, tracking his people like a prayer. Interior to command, a voice crackled. Heavy smoke, zero visibility, heat increasing near the stairwell, searching Bravo side bedroom. Eli's jaw tightened. Copy, stay low, watch the floor, report any change. Minutes stretched. Smoke thickened. The upstairs window pulsed orange, then went dark, then flared again. Ronald kept pacing, sweating, shaking, trying to claw his way into the scene. Then a crash came from inside, sharp and final, and the crowd jumped. Ronald's eyes went wild. He turned toward Eli. And for the first time, his arrogance truly broke. His voice cracked. Please, he whispered. I watched the word leave his mouth and land in the wet street like something sacred he didn't deserve. I watched my son absorb it without letting it steer him. Command to interior, Eli said. Status, the radio hissed, then. We've got a victim, teen male, unconscious but breathing, bringing him to the window. Eli's whole body tightened, but his voice stayed calm. Copy, ladder team, ready. EMS, stand by. The ladder extended with a groan of metal. Darnell climbed. Keisha crouched by the stretcher, eyes focused. The window glowed orange. Smoke poured like a waterfall. Then they appeared, two firefighters guiding a boy toward the opening. Jaylen's head lolled. His arms dangled. Soot streaked his face. They eased him onto the ladder, rung by rung, controlled and careful. Darnell took weight, slid him down. At the base, Keisha and her partner lifted him onto the stretcher and went straight to work. Oxygen, pulse, airway, the whole drill. Jaylen coughed. Wet, ugly, alive. The crowd exhaled. Ronald collapsed, sobbing on the wet pavement. Tasha ran in screaming, trying to grab the stretcher until the paramedics pushed her back. Everything was messy and human and loud. Through it all, Eli stayed focused. The fire wasn't done. His people were still inside. He didn't allow emotion to make more victims. "Interior, confirm all clear," he ordered. "All clear," came the reply. "Exiting now." "Copy, good work. Rotate out. Rehab." His crew emerged, sooty, exhausted, alive. Eli nodded once, a quiet thank you. Then Ronald staggered toward him, desperate to create a moment. "Captain," Ronald rasped. "Thank you. Thank you." Eli lifted a gloved hand, stopping him. Not cruel, just controlled. "Your son needs the hospital," Eli said. "Let EMS do their job." Ronald stared at the name on his jacket again. Jackson. His face twisted as he tried to make the letters mean something to him. "Eli," he breathed, like the name was a key he could suddenly use. Eli didn't answer. Ronald stepped closer. "Is that you?" he asked, eyes shiny, searching. Eli's voice came out calm as ice water. "Sir, step back!" The words landed heavier than a shout. Because they weren't anger. They were a boundary. This is where people misunderstand a karma and redemption story. They expect fireworks. They expect yelling, tears, dramatic forgiveness. What my son gave Ronald was something cleaner. Professional distance. The beginning of indifference. Because Eli wasn't punishing him. He wasn't begging. He wasn't trying to win. He was doing his job. As the ambulance doors shut and the sirens started again, quieter this time, urgent but controlled, I watched Ronald stand in the wet street alone under the flashing lights. For a moment, he looked like the young man who once promised me forever. Then I remembered the maternity ward. I remembered his voice calling my newborn broken. And that almost soft feeling turned into nothing again. Eli came to me once the scene stabilized. Helmet off, hair damp with sweat, soot on his face, eyes tired but steady. "Ma," he said, like the whole world wasn't watching. I stepped forward and he hugged me. Quick, careful. The way firefighters hug when they know they smell like smoke and grief. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Are you?" Eli looked past me, toward where Ronald had been. His jaw tightened just a fraction. "I'm fine," he said. "He didn't get in my head." I reached up and wiped a streak of soot from his cheek. "You were the calm," I whispered. Eli's mouth twitched. "That's the job." But I could see the old wound shifting under the bandage of his professionalism. And as we walked away from Maple Ridge, with the smell of smoke clinging to our clothes, I knew the hardest part of this true-life drama wasn't the flames. It was what Ronald would try to do next, because men like him don't accept no the first time. And now that he'd seen what my son became, he was going to want a piece of that light. Stay with me. We followed the ambulance lights like a thin thread through the dark. Eli didn't ride in the back with Jaylen. That wasn't his lane. He stayed on Maple Ridge long enough to make sure his crew was safe, to make sure the last hose line was shut down, to make sure nobody slipped on ice and ash. That's the part people don't film when they talk about a house fire rescue true story. They film the flames and the stretcher. They don't film the discipline. When the last engine rolled out, Eli finally turned to me. His eyes were tired in a way only smoke and responsibility can make them tired. "Ma, you can go home," he said. "You don't have to stay." I looked back at the blackened shell of Ronald Mercer's perfect house. The upstairs window that had glowed orange was now just a jagged hole, steam rising like the building was exhaling. "I'm not leaving you tonight," I told him. He nodded once, then guided me to his car with a gentle hand at my elbow, not because I couldn't walk, but because he knew my nerves ran wild after sirens. The hospital was bright and harsh, the kind of bright that makes every face look worried. We came through the emergency bay and found Jaylen already in a room, oxygen on his face, soot still smudged along his hairline. Tasha sat beside the bed, shaking, one hand locked around her son's wrist, like she could anchor him to the world. Ronald paced at the foot of the bed, jaw clenched, trying to control a situation that didn't care who he was. The moment Ronald saw Eli, his whole posture changed. It happened the same way it happened at the tape. First confusion, then recognition, then panic. Because now he was in a place where Eli's title mattered more than his ego ever did. "Captain," Ronald started, voice raw. Eli didn't correct him. He didn't accept it either. He stepped to the nurse like he was checking in on any patient. "How's he doing?" Eli asked. "CO exposure is moderate," the nurse said. "They're running labs. He's awake now, complaining of headache and chest tightness. No burns visible." Eli nodded. "Good." He leaned toward Jaylen, voice low and steady. "Hey, Jaylen, can you hear me?" Jaylen's eyelids fluttered. He gave a weak nod and coughed. "You did the hardest part," Eli said. "You stayed alive. Let them help you." Ronald moved like he wanted to touch Eli, claim him, pull him into the circle like a long-lost son returning home. The need in his face was almost embarrassing. Eli shifted, subtle, putting the bed between them without a scene. Ronald turned his desperation toward me instead. "Loretta," he said, like my name was a key. I didn't know He's done," I said quietly. Ronald blinked. "Not now. My son." "Your son is breathing," I answered, calm. "Thanks to the crew, and thanks to Captain Jackson doing his job." A physician walked in and explained the plan. Observation, oxygen, repeat labs, chest imaging if needed. Ronald nodded too fast. Tasha cried silently, wiping her cheeks with her sleeve. Jaylen stared at the ceiling like he was listening for the house to speak again. When the doctor stepped out, Eli asked the question that shifted the room. "How did the fire start?" he asked, neutral. Ronald frowned. "What?" "Your recollection matters," Eli said. "Space heater, candles, electrical issues? Anything that sparked before tonight?" Tasha answered before Ronald could. "The back outlet has been acting weird for months," she whispered. "Ron kept saying he'd fix it." Ronald shot her a look, sharp, warning. Old habits. Eli didn't react to the look. He simply nodded. "Tell the investigator everything," he said. "It matters." Then he turned to go. Ronald stepped into the doorway, like he could physically stop Eli from walking out of his life again. "Eli," he said, and this time the name came out like a prayer. 5 minutes, please." The word please still sounded foreign on him. Eli held Ronald's gaze for a beat. "Step aside, sir." Ronald's eyes widened. "I'm your father." Eli's face stayed calm, but his tone sharpened, steel sliding into place. "No," he said. "You're not." Silence fell hard. Ronald swallowed. "But Eli cut him off, not cruelly, just final. "My father is the man who stayed, the man who showed up. You didn't." Ronald's mouth trembled. "I was scared." "You were selfish," Eli corrected. "There's a difference." Tasha's head snapped up, and for a second I saw her realize she was married to a man who only understood consequences when they touched him. Ronald took a shaky step forward. "I made mistakes." "You made choices," Eli said. Ronald whispered, "I see you now." Eli nodded once. "Good. See Jaylen, too. He needs you." His eyes flicked to the bed. "Be the father for him that you refused to be for me." Ronald reached out, desperate. His fingertips almost touched Eli's sleeve. Eli stepped back. "Don't." One word, a boundary. Ronald's hand fell like it weighed 100 pounds. Eli glanced at me then, softer. "Ma, you okay to drive?" "I'm fine," I said, even though my heart was tumbling. "I'll walk you out," he said. We left the room with Ronald staring after us like a man watching a door close that he didn't have the key for. In the hallway, away from eyes and monitors, Eli exhaled slowly. He leaned on the wall for half a second, like he needed the building to hold him up. "You did good," I told him. He gave a humorless little laugh. "I did my job." "You did more than that," I said. "You stayed you." Eli looked down at his hands, still smelling faintly of smoke even after he'd washed them. "It's weird," he admitted. "I thought I'd feel rage, satisfaction, something." "And you don't?" He shook his head. "It's like he's a stranger wearing an old name." That was the cleanest description of forgiveness versus indifference I'd ever heard. Over the next 48 hours, the story spread through the city the way smoke spreads through a house. Maple Ridge Fire. Teen rescued. Captain Jackson praised for quick command. People posted clips and called it inspirational. They wrote comments about an abandoned child becomes a hero, about a disabled son becomes fire captain. They didn't know the real story. They didn't know the man behind the tape was the same man who walked out on that child. Ronald tried to push his way into Eli's day like he was entitled to a conversation. He called Station 12. Eli didn't take the call. He showed up in person, dressed like he was going to church, face practiced into remorse. Lieutenant Darnell Price met him at the desk with a calm that could freeze water. "Captain Jackson isn't available," Darnell said. "It's urgent," Ronald insisted. Darnell didn't blink. "If it's urgent, you call 911. Ronald left with his shoulders hunched. That night, Eli came by my house before his next shift, keys clinking on the counter. I could tell something was lodged under his calm. Not guilt, but irritation. The way a healed scar still itches when somebody rubs it. "He came to the station," Eli said. "What did he want?" I asked. Eli opened the fridge and stared like he was looking for patience. "Closure," he said, "like he can request it." I leaned on the counter. "Closure is for the person who did the damage," I said, "not the person who survived it." Eli's mouth twitched. "Exactly." The fire investigation report came back fast. Faulty wiring at a back outlet, overloaded by a cheap space heater, a slow hazard ignored until it turned into a disaster. Eli read it, then told me, "Tell everybody at church to stop using those little heaters like they're harmless." So I did, because prevention is love too. Later that week, Jaylen asked to see Eli. The nurses told me he'd been waking up gasping, reaching for the air like the smoke was still inside his lungs. When Eli stepped into the room, Jaylen's eyes widened. He looked at Eli's uniform shirt. Clean now, no soot, just the department patch. And then at Eli's brace. "You're the one," Jaylen whispered. "The captain." Eli gave a small nod. "I was on command, yeah." Jaylen swallowed hard. "My dad said, he said you were family." Eli didn't flinch. He pulled the chair closer to the bed, not to Ronald, but to the kid. "Your dad says a lot of things when he's scared," Eli said gently. "What matters is you're here." Jaylen's voice shook. "I thought I was going to die." "I know," Eli said. "That's why you talk to someone about it. Nightmares don't make you weak. They make you human." Jaylen stared at him, then whispered, "Why'd you help me?" Eli's answer came clean. "Because you needed help. Because that's my job. And because you're not responsible for what your father did." Jaylen blinked fast, tears sliding. "He's been crying," he admitted. "Like, he's sorry." Eli's eyes stayed steady. "He can be sorry and still not get access," he said. "That's part of growing up. Focus on healing. The rest isn't yours." Then, on Sunday morning, Ronald found me anyway. I was in the church parking lot with a bag of donated blankets when his shadow slid across the pavement. I didn't jump. I didn't rush. I just placed the blankets in my trunk slowly, like I had all the time in the world. "Loretta," he said, voice small. I closed the trunk. "What do you want, Ron?" He flinched at the name, like he'd forgotten I had the right to say it. "I need to talk," he said. "Please." "You've had 15 years," I replied. His eyes darted around, embarrassed to be seen begging. Jaylen almost died. And Eli saved him, I said. Ronald's throat worked. I didn't know he'd become that. That, I repeated, tasting the insult hidden inside his surprise. You mean a leader, a protector, a man. Ronald's shoulders sagged. I was wrong. That's not a confession, I told him. That's an observation. He swallowed. When Eli was born, I panicked. I thought about what people would say. I thought about my life. I was a coward. Yes, I said simply. He looked up fast, like he expected me to soften. I loved him, Loretta. No, I cut in. You loved the idea of a perfect son. You didn't love my child. His eyes filled. Watching him command that scene, it crushed me. It should, I said. Ronald's voice broke. Do you think he'll ever? No, I answered. One syllable. Clean. Stop asking for a gift you didn't earn. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, shaking. I'm trying to make it right. You can't, I told him. You can only be different for Jaylen. Be better for him. That's all you get now. Ronald nodded, defeated. Then I said the truth that had been sitting on my tongue since the maternity ward. You want to know the worst part, Ron? Eli didn't become who he is because you left. He became who he is in spite of you. Your abandonment didn't break him. It just revealed what you were. Ronald stood there trembling. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to argue. Then the fight drained out of him. Tell him, he whispered. Tell him I'm sorry. I held his gaze. If he wants to hear you, he'll hear you. I'm not your messenger. Ronald's shoulders dropped, like he'd finally accepted the weight of that boundary. He turned to leave, then paused. Thank you, he said hoarsely. For what? I asked. For raising him, he whispered, for not giving up. I stared at him until the gratitude turned into discomfort. I didn't do it for you, I said. I did it because he was my son. Ronald nodded slowly, like the sentence finally landed. Then he walked away across the parking lot, smaller than he'd ever been. That night, Eli came over after shift change. He looked tired, but calmer, like he'd set something down. He found you, he said. Yes, I answered. Eli waited. He apologized, I said. He asked me to tell you. Eli's face didn't move. And? I told him no. Eli's shoulders loosened, just a fraction. Good. I reached for his hand, the same hand that had signaled orders through fire. Baby, I said softly, you don't owe him a thing. I know, Eli said. My life is full, Ma. He squeezed my fingers. But I do owe you. My throat tightened. You don't owe me for loving you. Eli's mouth curved small. Maybe not, he said. But I'm going to keep paying it anyway. Outside, the wind finally died down. The house on Maple Ridge was a blackened memory. Jaylen was alive. Ronald was humbled. And my son, my so-called defective boy, had become the calm that pulled people out. But the story wasn't finished, because the next thing Ronald tried to do was buy his way back in. Ronald didn't understand boundaries the way healthy people do. He understood leverage. So when his begging didn't open a door, he went looking for a key. 3 weeks after the Maple Ridge fire, Eli came to my house on his off day with a folder in his hands and a look on his face that was half disbelief, half annoyance. Ma, he said, dropping into the chair at my kitchen table like the weight of the world was finally allowed to hit him. You are not going to believe this. I set down my coffee. Try me. He slid the folder across the table. Inside was a letter on fancy stationery, the kind of paper that thinks it's better than you. There were signatures, a proposal, and the words that made my stomach turn. A donation, a large one, to establish a fire safety and burn prevention fund in the name of Captain Elijah Jackson. I stared at it for a long moment. My first reaction wasn't gratitude. It was suspicion so sharp it tasted metallic. "He's trying to buy you," I said quietly. Eli leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. "That's what it feels like." The letter said Ronald wanted to honor Eli's leadership during the house fire rescue true story that had gone viral locally. It mentioned community outreach, smoke alarm installation, fire prevention education, and inspirational leadership. It used the right words, polished and pretty, like makeup on a bruise. And at the bottom, in neat script, it requested, politely like a joke, an invitation for Ronald Mercer to speak at the ceremony. I laughed once, short and bitter. "Oh, he's bold." Eli's jaw tightened. He told Darnell he wants to make things right and build something together. "Together," I repeated, tasting the lie. "He couldn't build a bedtime routine with you. Now he wants a stage." Eli didn't smile. "The fund could help a lot of families," he said. "Working class neighborhoods, seniors, kids, everything we've been pushing for." And that was how Ronald nearly got what he wanted. Because my son's heart is bigger than my anger. Eli had always been like that. Even when he was little, even when kids were cruel, he'd say, "Maybe they don't know better, Ma." He didn't collect grudges like trophies. He collected lessons. Still, I watched him wrestle with it at my table, and I understood what it really was. Forgiveness versus indifference. Not a quote, not a dramatic moment, a decision. Eli tapped the letter with 2 fingers. If I say no, kids might lose resources. If I say yes, he gets to stand in my light like he earned it. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. "Baby," I said softly, "you can accept money without accepting him." Eli's eyes lifted. "How?" "Conditions," I said. "Boundaries. Clear ones. The kind that can't be twisted." He sat very still, thinking. Then he nodded once, slow. That night he called Ronald. He didn't meet him in a restaurant. He didn't go to Ronald's apartment. He called him from the station office, with a witness nearby. Not because Eli was afraid, but because he respects truth. Eli put the phone on speaker and said, "Mr. Mercer." I heard Ronald's breath hitch through the line. "Eli, son?" "Captain Jackson," Eli corrected calmly. "Here are the terms." He laid them out like a command briefing. 1. The donation goes directly into a restricted account controlled by the department and a community oversight committee. 2. The fund's purpose is prevention and education in underserved neighborhoods. 3. You do not speak at any ceremony. 4. You do not use my name in media interviews beyond the fund title. 5. This does not change our relationship. We don't have one. Silence. Then Ronald's voice came through, small and strained. "You're punishing me." Eli's tone stayed even. "No, I'm protecting myself." Ronald swallowed. I want to tell people I'm proud." Eli didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult him. He simply said, "You can be proud in private. That's all you earned." Another silence, heavier. Finally, Ronald whispered, "Okay, I'll do it." When Eli hung up, he stared at the phone like it was a snake. "You good?" Lieutenant Darnell Price asked from the corner. Eli exhaled. "I'm fine," he said. "He doesn't get access. The community gets help. That's the trade." A week later, the city held a small press event at Station 12. Cameras, a banner. Smiling officials who loved a story they could package. They called it inspirational. They used phrases like, "Abandoned child becomes hero," and "Disabled son becomes fire captain." Like my son was a motivational poster and not a real person who had fought for every step. Ronald showed up, of course. He stood near the back in a suit that didn't fit quite right. Hair slicked back, hands folded like he was trying to look humble. He made eye contact with me once. I gave him nothing. Not hatred, not pity. Indifference. Eli stepped to the podium in his dress uniform, captain's badge catching the lights. His brace was visible beneath the pant leg if you knew where to look. He didn't hide it, he never had. He spoke about smoke alarms and space heaters, about exit plans, about how fires don't care how nice your neighborhood is. He spoke about kids like Jaylen, about how trauma lingers, about how prevention is love in action. He didn't mention Ronald, not once. That was the cleanest revenge I'd ever seen, making the man irrelevant in the very story he tried to hijack. Afterward, while people clapped and shook Eli's hand, Ronald drifted closer like a moth toward a porch light. "Eli," he said softly, "can we talk? Just one day. Coffee." Eli didn't flinch. He looked at Ronald the way he looked at any hazard, calm, aware, unmoved. "No," he said, polite as a closed door. "Mr. Mercer, the donation helps people." "That's good, but my life is full. There's no empty space for you to fill." Ronald's face crumpled like paper. Eli turned toward me then, and his expression softened into something warm and real. "Ready, Ma?" he asked, offering his arm. I took it. We walked out together, past the trucks, past the cameras, past Ronald standing behind us in the bright station lights, looking smaller than he ever looked in the smoke. In the car, Eli drove with one hand on the wheel and one hand resting briefly over mine, like he was grounding himself. "Thanks, Ma," he said. "For what?" My voice shook. "For never letting the world decide what I was," he said. "For raising me when it was hard. For making sure I became the calm." My eyes burned. "You were always the calm," I whispered. "You just grew into it." And that's the thing about a true life drama like this. The karma and redemption story isn't the fire, it's the years, the quiet choices, the love that doesn't quit. So if you're still listening, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from right now? And have you ever had to prove your worth when someone tried to label you? Hit like if this story touched you, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and tap the end screen to keep listening, because there are more stories like ours, and somebody out there needs to know. The only real disability is the lack of love.